The rain was not a cleansing. It was an insult. A cold, relentless drizzle that plastered Alara Thorne's thin coat to her skin and blurred the city lights into a watercolor of indifference. Each drop that landed on her cheek felt personal. Another small weight added to the crushing burden that had finally broken her spine. She stood at the bus stop, not because she was waiting for a bus, but because she did not know where else to go. Her feet had simply stopped moving, her body making a decision her mind had yet to process. She did not shiver, though the November chill had sunk deep into her bones. Shivering was an expenditure of energy she could no longer afford. Instead, she was still, a statue of quiet exhaustion carved from marble and regret. Her handbag, containing a useless set of keys to an apartment she could no longer pay for and a phone with a cracked screen and a dying battery, felt impossibly heavy. Inside her mind, there was a strange, humming silence, the kind of silence that doesn't echo, the kind that settles, like dust on abandoned furniture. An hour ago, she had been standing in the glass and chrome office of Marcus Vance. Her office, technically, her designs, her project. He had called her in, his face a mask of predatory calm. The final papers were on the desk. A non-disclosure agreement so vicious, so complete, it would not only gag her but erase her. It would legally codify the lie that the Solstice Tower, the project she had poured her soul into for 3 years, was his and his alone. "Just sign it, Alara," he had said, his voice smooth as oil slick on water. "It's a formality. A generous severance package is attached." She had looked at the paper, then at him. He was leaning back in the chair she had picked out, his posture one of practiced, unearned relaxation. He had not updated the file. He was working from a version of her that had never been accurate, a version that he believed was pliant, breakable. He had mistaken her grace for weakness, her patience for passivity. It was a fatal error in calculation. "No," she had said. Her voice was not loud, but it was clear. It cut through the hum of the air conditioning and the self-satisfied aura he wore like a cheap suit. His smile faltered, a hairline crack in the facade. "What did you say?" "I said no." The mask had shattered then. His face contorted, a sudden, ugly twist of rage. He had stood, slamming his hands on the polished mahogany. "You have an obligation. I made you. Everything you have is because of me." She thought about the sleepless nights, the meals missed, the social events skipped. She thought about the endless revisions, the structural calculations she ran in her dreams, the way she could feel the weight and balance of the building in her own body. She thought about him taking her preliminary sketches to the investors, passing them off as his own vague concepts. She thought about the way his name had appeared above hers on the internal memos, then how her name had disappeared altogether. She had simply turned and walked out. She did not run. She did not scream. She walked with the last of her dignity, past the junior architects who refused to meet her eye, past the receptionist who offered a small, sympathetic wince. She walked out of the building she had conceptually designed, into the insulting rain, and her feet carried her here, to this bus stop, to this end. The headlights of a car sliced through the gloom, slowing as it approached. A familiar, expensive German sedan. Marcus, of course. He was not the kind of man to let defiance be the final word. Control was a hunger in him, and she had just stolen his meal. The car pulled over with an aggressive jerk. He got out, not bothering with an umbrella, the rain plastering his expensive hair to his scalp. He looked furious, not the performative anger of the office, but something raw and unhinged. He strode toward her, his shoes splashing in the gutter. "Get in the car, Alara." It was not a request. It was a command issued from a place of absolute, assumed authority. She did not look at him. She kept her gaze fixed on a blurry red taillight across the street. "Go away, Marcus. Don't be a child," he spat, his voice low and venomous. He was close now, his cologne, a scent she once found comforting, now smelled cloying and foul. "You are going to come back to the office and you are going to sign those papers. You are not going to ruin this for me." For him. It was always for him. Her career, her talent, her life. They were all just resources for his grand project of self-aggrandizement. When she didn't move, his hand shot out and clamped around her upper arm. His grip was brutal, fingers digging into the thin muscle. The shock of it, the sheer violation, was a splash of icy water on her numb senses. "Let go of my arm," she said, her voice tight with a sudden, sharp terror. This was new. The cruelty had always been psychological, emotional. This was different. This was physical. "Not until you listen to me," he snarled, trying to pull her toward his car. "You think you can just walk away? After everything I've given you? You owe me." The world narrowed to the pressure of his fingers, the acrid smell of his rage, the cold rain on her face. A wave of dizziness washed over her. She hadn't eaten all day, or yesterday, really. Her knees felt weak, the concrete beneath her feet seeming to tilt and sway. She was going to faint, here on a dirty sidewalk, under the hand of the man who had stolen her future. It was in that moment, in that small, desperate pocket of time, that another set of headlights painted them in a stark white light. A long, impossibly black car slid past them, silent as a shark. A Maybach. It was the kind of car that didn't seem to drive on the road but to sail over it, a vessel from another reality of wealth and power. It passed them, and for a second Ilara's heart sank further. Just another witness who would do nothing. Then the impossible happened. The car, 100 feet down the highway, braked. Not a screech but a smooth, hydraulic halt. Then, with a quiet authority that defied all traffic laws and common sense, it executed a U-turn. A perfect, fluid arc in the middle of a 4-lane road. Horns blared from other cars, a sudden cacophony of outrage, but the black car paid them no mind. It completed its turn and glided back toward them, pulling up to the curb with a silence that was more powerful than any engine's roar. Marcus, blinded by his own fury, hadn't even noticed. He was still trying to drag a now limp Ilara. "I am not asking again," he hissed. The rear window of the Maybach descended. The motion was utterly silent, a sliver of dark glass disappearing into a dark door. The sudden absence of sound from the car was jarring. The world outside it, the rain, the distant sirens, Marcus's ragged breathing, seemed to rush in to fill the void, and then, just as quickly, fall silent again. A man was sitting in the back. He was not looking at Marcus. He was looking at Ilara. His face was calm, his posture utterly still. He wore a charcoal suit that seemed to absorb the light, and his hands rested on his lap, one over the other. It was a stillness so profound it felt like a gravitational force, pulling the entire chaotic scene into its orbit. The power shift was instantaneous and absolute. It was a change in atmospheric pressure. Marcus finally registered the car, the open window, the silent figure within. He froze, his hand still clamped on Ilara's arm, his mouth slightly agape. The arrogance drained from his face, replaced by a confused, wary recognition. The man in the car finally moved his eyes from Ilara to Marcus. He did not look at Marcus's face. He looked at his hand, a long, deliberate stare that seemed to carry a physical weight. Then he spoke. His voice was low, unstrained, yet it cut through the night with the chilling precision of a scalpel. "Let go of her arm." It was the same sentence Ilara had spoken, but it was not the same statement. Hers had been a plea born of fear. His was a law of physics. It was not a request. It was a description of the immediate future. Marcus flinched as if struck. Some of his bluster returned, a reflex of a man unaccustomed to being challenged. "Who the hell are you? This is a private matter. This is my—" "I will not say it again," the man interrupted. His voice did not get louder. It got quieter, colder. He did not rush. He was not performing. He was simply stating a fact that Marcus was taking too long to comprehend. From behind the Maybach, another vehicle, a black SUV that had been trailing it like a shadow, pulled up. Two men in dark suits got out. They moved with a fluid, unnerving efficiency, without wasted motion. They did not run. They simply arrived. Marcus saw them. The last of his bravado evaporated, leaving behind a raw, naked panic. His hand, which had been a vice a moment ago, flew off Alara's arm as if it were red-hot. He took a stumbling step back. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking. I didn't realize it was you. This is a misunderstanding. Alara and we were just—" Damien Sterling's gaze was flat, unmoved. He had already dismissed Marcus from his reality. His attention was back on Alara, who was swaying on her feet, the world tunneling into a dark, narrow point. "You're safe," Damien Sterling said to her. It was not a reassurance. It was a proclamation. Then, to the men from the SUV, he said one word. "Remove him." The two men flanked Marcus. They didn't touch him aggressively. One simply placed a calm, firm hand on his shoulder. It was enough. The fight was gone. The pathetic, deflated figure of Marcus Vance was guided, stumbling, back toward his own car. One of the security men got into the driver's seat of Marcus's sedan, the other into the passenger seat. The car started and drove away, with Marcus sandwiched between the two silent figures. He was being escorted from his own life. The world went quiet again. It was just the rain, the black car, and the man inside it. The car door opened from the inside, pushing out into the wet night. Damien Sterling emerged, an umbrella blossoming open over his head in one smooth, practiced motion. He was tall, leaner than he appeared sitting down, and he moved with the same unhurried grace as his car. He did not rush to her side. He walked around the back of the vehicle and stopped in front of her, holding the large black umbrella so that it shielded them both from the rain. He stood a respectful distance away, not invading her space. He did not touch her, did not try to guide her. He simply brought the shelter to her. The sudden cessation of the cold drizzle on her head and shoulders was a profound relief. "Miss Thorne," he said, his voice still that same low, steady baritone. "Please get in the car. You're not well." Alara stared at him. Her mind was struggling to catch up. Damien Sterling. The Damien Sterling. The silent, almost mythical investor behind the Solstice Tower project. A man known in architectural circles as a phantom, a name on a letterhead who controlled billions but was never seen. He was supposed to be a recluse. Yet here he was, standing in a puddle on a Tuesday night, holding an umbrella over her head. She should have been terrified. A strange man, immense power, a dark car. Every instinct for self-preservation, honed by years of navigating Marcus's manipulations, screamed at her to run. But her body was betraying her. Her legs felt like water, and a black fuzz was creeping in at the edges of her vision. Running was not an option, and there was something in his eyes, a quiet recognition, a complete lack of predatory intent, that short-circuited her fear. He was not looking at her like a victim or an opportunity. He was looking at her like a problem that needed to be solved. She started, but her voice was a faint whisper. He seemed to understand. He didn't press. He simply waited, a bastion of calm in her personal storm. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, she gave a small, jerky nod. It was the only answer she could manage. He opened the rear door wider and stepped back, giving her a clear path. She moved slowly, her body stiff and uncooperative. As she ducked into the car, her hand brushed against the buttery soft leather of the seat. The interior was warm and smelled faintly of leather and clean, sterile air. It was like entering a different world. A silent, protected space, insulated from the rain and the cold and the ugliness of the last hour, of the last 3 years. He slid in after her, closing the door with a solid, satisfying thud that sealed out the rest of the world. The silence inside the car was absolute. The partition to the driver was up. They were suspended in a moving vault. He did not speak immediately. He reached into a small, refrigerated compartment and pulled out a bottle of chilled water and a small, dense protein bar. He placed them on the seat between them, not handing them to her directly, as if he understood that even that small gesture might feel like a demand. "Drink," he said softly, "and eat when you can." She stared at the items. Simple sustenance. But in that moment, it felt like the most profound act of kindness she had experienced in years. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the water bottle. She had to use 2 hands to twist the cap, a pathetic admission of her own weakness. She drank, the cold water a shock to her system, but a welcome one. It was real. This was real. She managed a few sips before her strength gave out. She leaned her head back against the ridiculously comfortable headrest and closed her eyes. The car was moving, but the ride was so smooth it was almost imperceptible. "How did you know my name?" she finally whispered, her eyes still closed. There was a slight pause. "I make it my business to know the people responsible for my investments, Miss Thorne." Her eyes snapped open. She turned her head to look at him. He was watching her, his expression unreadable but his attention total. "Marcus is the head of the project," she stated, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. It was a test. A flicker of something, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement, touched his lips. "Marcus Vance is the head of his own publicity. He is not an architect. He is a salesman who sells other people's work." The directness of the statement stunned her. There was no hedging, no corporate doublespeak. Just the flat, unvarnished truth. He knew. "I have read every draft of the Solstice Project," he continued, his voice steady as iron wrapped in silk. "From the initial conceptual proposal to the final structural blueprints submitted last week. I've read the versions with your name on them, Miss Thorne. And I have read the later versions, where your name was conspicuously absent, though the intellectual signature of the design remained unchanged." Alara felt a strange, painful emotion swell in her chest. It was a terrible mix of vindication and grief. To be seen finally. To have her work, her mind, recognized by the one person who mattered most on this project. But it came at the cost of having her erasure so clearly laid bare. He had been watching. He had known all along what was happening. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked, the question laced with an accusation she couldn't hold back. "It was not the opportune moment," he replied without apology. Vance had entangled the project in a web of subcontracts and legal bindings that made his removal delicate. A public implosion would have jeopardized the timeline. "I prefer to dismantle things quietly. From the foundation up." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "His foundation, it turns out, was you. When he foolishly chose to fire you, he removed the cornerstone of his own structure. He made himself obsolete." The cold, strategic language should have been chilling. But it wasn't. It was clarifying. He was not talking about people. He was talking about systems, structures, assets. And in his calculus, she was the asset. Marcus was the liability. It was a brutal, unsentimental assessment, and it was the most validating thing she had ever heard. He was not saving a damsel in distress. He was securing a critical component of his investment. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, the water having cleared some of the fog from her brain. "To a safe place," he said. "You will not be returning to your apartment. Marcus knows where you live. He is volatile and predictable. He will go there next." He gestured to the phone in her purse. "He will also attempt to contact you. I would advise you to turn that off." It was not advice. It was another command, cloaked in politeness. She reached into her bag, her fingers finding the cracked screen. There were already 7 missed calls from Marcus. She held the power button down until the screen went black. The act felt final, a small, decisive severing. "The apartment I'm taking you to is in one of my buildings," he explained. "The security is absolute. You will have privacy. There will be a doctor waiting to make sure you are well. Car will be at your disposal. Anything you need will be provided." It was too much. The sheer scale of his intervention was overwhelming. "Mr. Sterling, I don't have any money. I can't pay you for any of this." He turned his head to look out the window at the passing city lights, a blur of neon and concrete. "Consider it a retainer, Miss Thorne," he said quietly. "For your future services." He turned back to her. "The Solstice Tower still needs its architect." And there it was. Not charity. a transaction, an offer of employment, wrapped in an impregnable blanket of security. He was not giving her a handout. He was giving her a job. Her job. The one she had been stolen from. Tears, hot and unexpected, pricked at the back of her eyes. She refused to let them fall. She had not cried in front of Marcus. She would not cry in front of this man. She simply nodded, a tight, constricted movement of her throat. "Okay," she whispered. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod in return. "Good." The rest of the drive passed in that same charged silence. Alara finally managed to eat half of the protein bar. The infusion of sugar and protein was like a switch being flipped. The world sharpened. The trembling in her hands subsided. She was still exhausted, bone-deep weary, but the immediate crisis of her body shutting down had passed. She was able to think. The car descended into a private underground garage, passing through 3 separate security checkpoints before parking in a designated spot, marked simply Sterling. A private elevator stood waiting. Damien led her to it, his driver remaining by the car. The elevator opened directly into an apartment. No, not an apartment. A penthouse. The space was vast, a minimalist masterpiece of glass, steel, and pale wood. One entire wall was a window overlooking the city, a glittering tapestry of a million lives. The furniture was sparse, elegant, and brutally expensive. There was no clutter, no personal effects. It was less a home than a statement of clean, precise, and absolute control. A woman in the discreet uniform of a private nurse was waiting. She was older, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. "This is Elena," Damien said. "She will look after you." He then turned to Alara. "I have business to attend to. This is your space for as long as you require it. The kitchen is stocked. My personal assistant's number is by the phone. If you need anything at all, day or night, you call. Someone will be here in 5 minutes." He looked at her, a long, assessing gaze. "Rest, Miss Thorne. We will speak tomorrow." And then he was gone, the elevator doors closing with a soft whoosh, leaving her in the silent, cavernous space with the kind-eyed nurse. Alara stood in the middle of the living room, looking out at the city she loved, the city she had wanted to help shape. She felt like a shipwreck survivor who had washed ashore on an impossibly luxurious and deserted island, safe but utterly adrift. The next few days passed in a surreal haze of recovery. Elena, the nurse, was a quiet, comforting presence. She checked Alara's vitals, made her simple, nourishing meals, and then retreated, leaving her to the silence. Alara slept for 14 hours the first night, a deep, dreamless sleep that was more like a coma. When she woke, the physical exhaustion had receded, leaving behind the hollow ache of emotional trauma. She explored the penthouse. It was a beautiful cage. Everything was top of the line, from the ridiculously complex coffee machine to the cashmere throws on the sofa. But it was sterile. There were no books, no art that wasn't chosen for its investment value, no smudges on the glass. It was Damien Sterling's world in microcosm. Perfect, controlled, and devoid of messy humanity. Her own life had been packed into one handbag. She had nothing. Her clothes, her books, her drafting tools. All were in an apartment she couldn't return to. On the 3rd day, she couldn't stand the inactivity any longer. She called the number for Damien's assistant. A crisp, female voice answered on the first ring. "Yes, this is Alara Thorne," she said, feeling foolish. I need some things. Paper, pencils, a straight edge, some clothes." "Of course, Miss Thorne. What size are you? And what kind of paper and lead weight do you prefer?" The specificity of the question caught her off guard. A 4 sketch, at least 120 GSM, and 2H and 4B pencils. As for clothes, just some basics. Jeans, sweaters, size 6-inch. "It will be there within the hour," the voice said, and the line went dead. 52 minutes later, the private elevator opened and a man from building services delivered 3 large, elegant shopping bags and a professional-grade art portfolio. The portfolio contained not just the paper and pencils she'd asked for, but a full set of architectural drafting tools, far better than her own. The shopping bags contained not just jeans and sweaters, but a complete wardrobe of beautifully tailored, understatedly expensive clothes in shades of gray, cream, and black. There was also underwear, toiletries, running shoes, and a simple, elegant black dress. Someone had not just fulfilled her request. They had anticipated her every need. The thoroughness was both breathtaking and unsettling. It was the kind of efficiency that felt like a form of surveillance. She was being managed, handled. The fear she'd suppressed in the car, the fear of trading one form of control for another, resurfaced. She pushed it down. She put on a pair of the new jeans and a soft gray sweater. They fit perfectly. Then she opened the portfolio, took out a sheet of crisp, clean paper, and picked up a 2H pencil. The moment the lead touched the paper, something settled in her. This was her language. This was her territory. She didn't sketch the Solstice Tower. She couldn't. It was still a wound. Instead, she began to sketch the penthouse, but not as it was. She sketched it as a home. She added a wall of overflowing bookshelves, a comfortable, slightly worn armchair by the window, a messy pile of magazines on the coffee table. She redesigned the sterile space, infusing it with the life it lacked. She worked for hours, losing herself in the lines and shadows, her mind finally quiet again. But this time it was a productive, peaceful quiet. That evening, Damien Sterling returned. The elevator opened and he walked in, carrying a briefcase. He stopped when he saw her, curled up on the vast sofa, surrounded by sketches. He had taken off his suit jacket and loosened his tie. He looked tired. "I see you've been busy," he said. His eyes went to the drawings scattered on the coffee table. Alara felt a defensive prickle. "Your assistant was very efficient." He walked over and looked down at the sketches. He did not touch them. He just looked. He saw her modifications, the life she had imagined into his sterile space. He was silent for a long time. "You've improved it," he said finally. It was not a compliment. It was an observation. Like her, he dealt in facts. "It lacks warmth," she said, finding her footing. This was a conversation she could have. Architecture, design. It's a beautiful space, but it's not a human one. It's designed to impress, not to comfort. "I don't require comfort," he stated. "Everyone requires comfort," she countered. "Some people just build higher walls to pretend they don't." He looked at her then, a real look, a flicker of surprise in his controlled features. He had expected gratitude, perhaps fear, or deference. He had not expected to be analyzed. He had not expected a challenge. He pulled up a chair, an austere piece of Italian design, and sat opposite her. "My mother would agree with you," he said, a hint of dry wit in his tone. "She finds my aesthetic monastic." "She's not wrong," Alara said, a small smile touching her lips for the first time in days. A real smile. That night, they ate dinner together, takeout from a high-end restaurant served on the penthouse's minimalist china. He didn't talk about Marcus. He didn't talk about the project. He asked her about her university thesis. He asked her about her influences, about the architects she admired and the ones she despised. He listened, really listened. He absorbed her words, processing her opinions, filing them away. She found herself talking more than she had in years. She spoke of her belief that buildings had souls, that they could shape the lives of the people within them for better or for worse. He argued, playing devil's advocate, that a building was merely a container, a set of functions executed in steel and glass. Their conversation was a parry and thrust of ideas, a debate between pragmatism and poetry. She felt alive. She felt seen. While Alara was rediscovering her own mind, Damien was quietly waging a war. He did not speak of it, but his days were a relentless campaign to obliterate Marcus Vance. He had his legal team, a pack of sharks in $1,000 suits, tear apart every contract Vance Architecture had ever signed with Sterling Enterprises. They found a clause, buried deep in the initial funding agreement, that gave Sterling veto power and auditing rights over any and all subsidiary acquisitions. Marcus's firm, it turned out, was owned by a larger conglomerate, a fact he had used to secure lines of credit. Damien's financial team spent 2 days in a quiet, brutal negotiation with that parent company. They presented evidence of Marcus's financial mismanagement, not just the intellectual property theft from Alara, but a pattern of inflated invoices, undeclared bonuses, and risky investments made with company funds. The parent company, facing a massive scandal and the wrath of Damien Sterling, folded. Sterling Enterprises acquired them, the entire conglomerate. It was a footnote in the financial news, a minor acquisition for a giant like Sterling. But it was a death sentence for Marcus. Damien now owned the company that owned Marcus's firm. He owned the building. He owned the contracts. He owned Marcus's professional life, lock, stock, and barrel. Marcus, meanwhile, was living in a state of arrogant delusion. After being unceremoniously dumped back at his car, his fury had quickly curdled into a kind of desperate confidence. He was a survivor. He was a master of spin. This was just a setback. He had been fired, of course. The day after the incident at the bus stop, he received a curt, formal notice of the termination of the Solstice Tower contract. It cited a breach of professional conduct. He was locked out of the project servers. It was a blow, a massive one, but he believed it was temporary. He was convinced Alara was the key. He thought Damien Sterling was infatuated with her, a rich man playing white knight. He believed that if he could just get to Alara, he could manipulate her, convince her to smooth things over. He had built her, he reasoned, and he could make her fix this. He started texting her. Alara, pick up. We need to talk. This has all gone too far. Are you with him? Don't be a fool. He'll get bored of you in a week. I'm the one who has always been there for you. I know you're seeing these. Give her 3 days, my lawyer said. She'll be begging to come back. He was right. Sign the NDA. I can still fix this. I can get the project back if you just support me. Don't throw away our future for some rich asshole's fantasy. The messages went into a void. Her phone remained off, locked in a drawer in the penthouse. His powerlessness was a physical itch, a constant, maddening irritation. He hired a private investigator to find her, but the man came back empty-handed. She's vanished, the investigator said. It's like she fell into a black hole. A very rich, very secure black hole. Desperation began to set in. His credit cards were being declined. His access to the corporate accounts was frozen pending an audit. Whispers were following him. Colleagues were avoiding his calls. The world he had built was dissolving around him, and he couldn't understand why. He was Marcus Vance. People didn't do this to him. Then he heard about the Obsidian Gala, the annual flagship event for Sterling Enterprises, the most exclusive, high-power gathering in the city's business calendar. Everyone who was anyone would be there. Damien Sterling, who usually avoided such events, was slated to give the keynote address. It was a sign, a chance, a stage. He would confront them there, publicly. He would expose Sterling as a predator who had stolen his employee, his project, his life. He would paint Alara as a confused, manipulated victim. He would create a scene so loud, so messy, that they would have to negotiate with him just to make it go away. It was a terrible plan born of pure narcissistic panic, but in his mind, it was brilliant. He called in his last remaining favor and secured a ticket. It cost him nearly everything he had left in his personal account. As he held the embossed invitation, he felt a surge of his old power. He was back in the game. In the penthouse, 2 days before the gala, Damien presented Alara with a long, flat box. I would like you to accompany me to an event on Saturday, he said. It was, as always, phrased as a request but felt like a statement of settled fact. She looked at him, wary. What kind of event? The Obsidian Gala, an annual absurdity my company is forced to host. But it is a useful absurdity. A great deal of business is conducted there, he paused. It is time for the architect of the Solstice Tower to be formally introduced. Her heart hammered. To be introduced. Not as his date, not as his new pet project. As the architect. Marcus will be there, she said. It wasn't a question. Damien's expression didn't change. Yes, he was not hiding it. He was informing her. He was giving her the choice to face the confrontation, armed with the knowledge of what was coming. He was treating her as a partner in the strategy. She thought about the woman at the bus stop, weak and terrified. She thought about the woman she was now, sketching new worlds into existence in a safe, quiet room. The transformation was not yet complete, but the foundation was set. Hiding was no longer an option. Okay, she said. He nodded, then gestured to the box. Open it. She lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in black tissue paper, was a gown. It was the color of a deep emerald forest, a rich, vibrant green that seemed to drink the light. The fabric was a heavy silk that felt cool and substantial to the touch. The design was architecturally precise. Clean lines, a structured bodice, and a long, elegant column of a skirt. It was not a princess dress. It was armor. It was a statement. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. How did you know my favorite color was green? She asked, her voice soft. He looked away, a rare crack in his composure. My assistant is thorough, but Alara saw something else in his eyes. He had not just asked his assistant to buy a dress. He had chosen this. He had seen her essence, and translated it into fabric and form. The night of the Obsidian Gala arrived. The event was held in the grand ballroom of a hotel Damien's company owned. A soaring space with crystal chandeliers and a view that rivaled the one from the penthouse. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low hum of immense power. Conversations were currency. Alliances were forged and broken over glasses of champagne. Alara walked in on Damien Sterling's arm. The emerald gown fit as if it were sculpted for her. Her hair was styled in a simple, elegant knot at the nape of her neck. Her makeup was minimal. She wore no jewelry except for a pair of small diamond studs. Another gift left discreetly on her dresser that morning. She was a slash of vibrant color in a sea of black tuxedos and muted, fashionable dresses. Every head turned. The sudden silence was a wave that washed over the room. They weren't just looking at a beautiful woman on the arm of a powerful man. They were looking at a mystery. Damien Sterling, the recluse, had not brought a date to an event in over a decade. And this woman, she did not have the look of a socialite or a model. She had a seriousness, a quiet intensity in her eyes. She looked like she belonged there. Damien guided her through the room with a calm, proprietary air. He introduced her simply. This is Alara Thorne. He offered no other explanation, letting the mystery deepen. The ambiguity was a power play, and it was working. People were intrigued. They were watching. And then she saw him, Marcus. He was standing near the bar, looking frantic and out of place. His tuxedo was slightly rumpled, his hair a mess. He was scanning the crowd with a desperate, predatory hunger. His eyes landed on them and a switch flipped. The desperation was replaced by a renewed, ugly arrogance. He had found his stage. He started toward them, weaving through the clusters of powerful people, his movements jerky and aggressive. He was a disruption in the smooth, controlled flow of the room. People turned to watch, sensing a crack in the perfect facade of the evening. Damien saw him coming. He did not tense. He did not move. He simply stopped, turning slightly to face the threat, his body subtly shielding Alara's. He placed a hand lightly on the small of her back. It was not a romantic gesture. It was a signal. I am here. Stay calm. Marcus reached them, his face flushed, his breathing heavy. Alara, he said, his voice too loud for the room. He reached for her, his hand closing around the same arm he had grabbed at the bus stop. The emerald silk was a thin barrier against the familiar, brutal grip. Alara did not flinch. She looked down at his hand, then back up at his face. Her expression was cold, clear, and utterly devoid of the fear he expected to see. Let go of my arm, Marcus, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried in the sudden, attentive silence. You have to tell him. Marcus pleaded, his voice a frantic whisper, ignoring her command. He gestured wildly at Damien. This is all a misunderstanding. You have an obligation to me, to our firm. You can't just let him do this. Damien Sterling did not look at Marcus. He looked at the hand on Alara's arm. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he placed his own hand over Marcus's. His touch was light, but the effect was electric. Marcus froze, the contact seeming to burn him. Marcus, Damien said. His voice was a low, conversational hum, yet everyone in the 20-foot radius heard it perfectly. You seem to be operating under a misapprehension. Several, in fact. He turned his gaze from Marcus's hand to his eyes. First, you believe you have a right to touch her. You do not. He applied the slightest pressure, and Marcus's fingers involuntarily uncurled, his hand falling away from Alara's arm. Second, Damien continued, his voice remaining perfectly level, you speak of your firm, an interesting choice of words. As of 5 p.m. yesterday, Sterling Enterprises completed its acquisition of the North American portfolio of Alistair Price Holdings, the parent company of Vance Architecture, to settle a number of their outstanding financial indiscretions. A confused murmur rippled through the onlookers. Marcus stared, his mind visibly struggling to process the information. What are you talking about? I'm talking about ownership, Marcus, Damien said, his tone one of patient explanation, as if speaking to a slow child. I own your parent company, which means I own your firm. I own your office building. I own the chair you were sitting in when you tried to intimidate Miss Thorne into signing away her life's work. The board of Vance Architecture, my board, was convened via conference call an hour ago. Your position was terminated. For cause. The color drained from Marcus's face. He looked pale, almost green, under the warm ballroom lights. No. The project, my designs, the Solstice Tower, he stammered, clutching at the last piece of his stolen identity. Damien gave a small, cold smile. It was a terrifying sight. He gestured with his free hand toward Alara, who stood beside him, silent and composed. You mean her designs, he corrected him softly. I believe there may be some confusion on that point as well. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and held it up for Marcus to see. The screen displayed a PDF. It was a collection of signed, notarized affidavits. I took the liberty of interviewing your junior architects this morning, Damien explained. The ones you had cataloging Miss Thorne's old drafts. They were remarkably forthcoming once they were assured of their future employment with a firm that values integrity. They have all attested under penalty of perjury that the core design, the structural innovations, and the aesthetic vision for the Solstice Tower originated exclusively and entirely with Alara Thorne. It was the final blow. The last support beam of Marcus's world had just been vaporized. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. His entire life, his career, the grand edifice of lies he had constructed, had been dismantled and demolished in under 2 minutes by a few quiet sentences. He began to shake, a violent, uncontrollable tremor. His eyes, wide with horror, darted around the room, seeing only the shocked, contemptuous faces of his former peers. He was naked, exposed, ruined. Then came the collapse. It was not a dramatic, theatrical fall. It was a slow, pathetic crumpling. His knees buckled, his spine seemed to dissolve. He sank to the floor, landing in a heap of rumpled tuxedo and shattered pride. A sound tore from his throat, a choked, guttural sob of pure, absolute despair. He dropped his head into his hands and wept. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. No one moved. They just stared at the broken man on the floor. 2 of Damien's security men, who had been standing discreetly nearby, moved in. They gently, but irresistibly, lifted Marcus to his feet. He was still sobbing, a blubbering, incoherent mess. They supported his weight and quietly, efficiently, escorted him from the room, a ghost being exorcised from the world of the living. Damien watched him go, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to the silent, stunned crowd. He put his arm around Alara's shoulders, a gesture of public, unequivocal support. "My apologies for the interruption," he said, his voice calm and clear, resonating through the vast room. "There was a piece of business that required a more public resolution." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then he looked at Alara, a deep pride in his eyes. "Allow me to reintroduce you all. This is Alara Thorne. She is the chief architect of the Solstice Tower. And as of this morning, she is the new head of the Sterling Architectural Division, which will be overseeing its completion." It was a coronation, public anointing. He had not just destroyed her enemy. He had taken her stolen crown, polished it, and placed it on her head in front of the entire world. A slow, hesitant applause started from somewhere in the back. It grew, quickly, into a wave of thunderous applause. They were not just clapping for him. They were clapping for her, for the story they had just witnessed. The quiet, underestimated woman who had just been vindicated on the grandest possible stage. Alara stood tall, her hand resting on Damien's arm. She did not smile. She did not cry. She simply absorbed the moment, the sound, the light. She felt the weight of the last 3 years, the constant, grinding pressure, finally lift. It evaporated into the warm, glittering air of the ballroom, leaving behind a feeling she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Peace. Later that night, they stood by the immense window of the penthouse. The gala was over. The city glittered below them, a web of light and shadow, a living blueprint. Alara was still in the emerald gown, but she had taken off the diamond studs. She held a glass of water, the cool condensation a comfort against her skin. She had not spoken much on the ride home. There was nothing to say. He had said it all. He had done it all. Now, in the quiet of the apartment, the silence was not charged or heavy. It was calm, settled. She thought about Marcus, a pathetic figure being led away. She felt no pity. She felt no triumph. She felt nothing. He was a closed file, a piece of her past that had been archived and locked away. He had no more power over her. He had no more space in her head. She took a slow, deep breath and then another. It felt like the first real breath she had taken in years. An exhale that carried with it the dust and debris of her old life. Damien came to stand beside her, not touching, but close. His presence was a solid, reassuring warmth in the cool room. "Are you all right?" he asked. It was the first time he had asked her about her feelings directly. She turned to look at him. In the soft light of the apartment, the hard edges of his face seemed to soften. She saw not just the powerful CEO, but the man who had ordered her specific pencils, the man who knew her favorite color, the man who saw her mind and not just her pain. A smile touched her lips, a real one that started deep inside and reached her eyes, crinkling the corners. "Yes," she said, and it was the truth. "I am." He held her gaze for a long moment, and she saw a flicker of something vulnerable in his own eyes. A relief, as if he had been holding his breath, too. "Good," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. He took her hand. It was not a gesture of possession or passion. It was a gesture of partnership, of quiet, mutual understanding. His hand was warm and steady around hers. "The work begins tomorrow," he said. "The Solstice Tower has a very aggressive timeline." She smiled again, a wider smile this time. "I'm aware. I wrote the timeline." A hint of a smile touched his own lips. "Of course you did." They stood there for a long time, hand in hand, looking out at the city that was now hers to shape. Her past was a ghost, her future a blueprint waiting to be built. She thought about the strange, violent, and ultimately liberating journey that had brought her here. From a rainy bus stop to this impossible view. From being an object of pity to the subject of applause. She had once told him that she didn't leave when things became complicated. It had been a statement about her work, her dedication to a project. Now it felt like something more. Promise. A definition of her character. He had not run from her complication. He had stepped into the middle of it and resolved it with ruthless efficiency. This was not a fairy tale ending. There was no swell of violins, no passionate kiss. It was something quieter, deeper, and more real. It was the beginning of a partnership between two complex, formidable people. A family of two, built not on romance, but on a foundation of mutual respect, absolute safety, and the quiet, unspoken promise of what comes next. The work was just beginning, and for the first time in a very long time, Elara Thorne was excited to get started.